Welcome to the Mark Atwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. Before I start, remember, Linktree link near the video. That's where my email list, most important way of keeping in touch with me, if you don't mind. And I don't spam, so it's all good. So, how have they pulled this off? What have they done? How have they? Part of the spell that they've put on people is fascinating, and we're all unpicking it. One part of, I think, this whole thing is that I've been saying since the beginning, well, for a number of years actually, that we're in we've got Stockholm syndrome with the government. I mean, there are people literally dropping dead who who are not putting two and two together. How are they getting away with that? How are they getting away with that? It's our relationship with government is definitely an abusive relationship. So instead of me waffling about it, I thought I'd bring on an expert in narcissism. Hello, Clea.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, I can call you an expert in narcissistic abuse. I think everybody's an expert in narcissistic abuse to some degree, even though they might not realize it.
I'm not the abuser, just to be clear. I'm not an expert in narcissistically abusing people. You never know.
Well, I've been called a narcissist before, and it was before I knew what the word meant, and I actually went to see a psychiatrist in London who was an expert in it, and he told me I was wasting his time after 20 minutes. So I was really confused because this term of narcissism has been bandied around for the last sort of 10 years, very much more than it was before. And of course, because of the Black Mirror, we've all become narcissists to some degree. Social media has certainly had a bad effect on kids, especially who've grown up with this, who probably don't know the difference. You yourself were in a narcissistic abusive relationship, and that, which is, that qualifies anybody as an expert to survive that. And it's a prickly subject as well, isn't it? It's a difficult subject.
It is. It really is.
But I think you've written a guide on how to survive narcissistic abuse in a relationship, but then you've expanded that into our relationship with government, how to survive a narcissistic government.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
Absolutely. First of all, let me make a comment on something you just mentioned. You're talking about children. So all children are quote unquote narcissistic. If you think of narcissism as being self-centered, it's not knowing, not having empathy for others because you just don't have any understanding of other people's feelings and emotions. For example, my daughter has no clue what it takes for me as a single mom to take care of her and keep a roof over her head. She asked me, why are you working? I don't know how to explain. She's so little. I don't know how to explain how things work in the world. So she's not doing it because she has a lack of empathy. When she sees children crying, she actually feels sad. So I know there's nothing wrong with her. She understands things that relate to her that she's experienced, but she's not able to understand things that she has no guidelines to understand. So the idea is that we start all out as narcissists in that sense, in the sense that we're very self-centered and we have no understanding of the world. And as we grow up, we get a greater understanding and we can relate to other people's pain and suffering, not because we have to have the exact same experience, but because we can kind of relate. I know if something hurts me, it might hurt somebody else. This is a normal development in humanity. The problem is a lot of people have, if you want to call it arrested development, basically they never overgrow the childhood phase and they cannot relate to other people. So lack of empathy and compassion is one of the #1 traits of a narcissist. So I know the word as being bandied around. Anybody who gets out of a marriage is normally calling the other person a narcissist. To tell you my personal story, I actually didn't know my ex-husband was a narcissist. In fact, until I went through another narcissistic relationship right after leaving him, and I had no clue this other guy was a narcissist too. And then I started looking at these people and said, wow, they seem like the same person, they just look different. And that's when I started looking into things. So many times we're just not aware, because if you're not a narcissist yourself, meaning you do have empathy, you do care about other people, you are self-aware if you're doing something wrong, you try to be better, etc., etc. You just cannot relate to people that couldn't care less. It's all about them. And they will walk over your dead body if it means getting to something they want. There are a lot more traits to a narcissist than this, but these are the main traits. Of course, it doesn't mean that if you have one of these traits, there are several traits that could give away the fact that somebody's a narcissist. But you could have a couple of these and it doesn't make you a narcissist. So again, let's not just throw this word around and apply to everybody we don't like or we think they're a jerk. There's a very specific personality type there. But if you like, I will tell you a little bit about my personal story, which will explain how I got to the point where I realized that there were a lot of parallels between a narcissistic person and what we're experiencing and observing nowadays in the world at large and the culture. I will make this very brief because I would like to go more in depth into other aspects of it that I think are going to be helpful to your audience. So just very quickly, the night of my 15th wedding anniversary, I found out that my ex-husband had been cheating on me with prostitutes since before we got married. I was 3 months pregnant with a child at the time. We had moved to Thailand. We were living in Thailand. We moved there to have this child via IVF. And I had given up my thriving real estate business in the United States to do this and to be with him because he had a much better chance of finding an amazing job in Thailand. I did all of this thinking this is what you're supposed to do to support your family. Then I found this out and I decided that I'd had enough. I already was not very happy in my relationship. I was not treated very nicely. We'll just leave it at that. I felt like a piece of furniture. I only was given attention when I was needed, and the rest, and I was taking care of a lot of things and being taken for granted. So I decided to move on, and that I wanted nothing more to do with men. So 2 weeks after landing back in the United States, of course, I fell in love with another man. There's a reason for this. See, I have later put together all the pieces. I am not the kind of person who falls in love at first sight. So I already found this all strange. But of course, I justified it. I told myself, it's meant to be. It is love. Bottom line, 3 years later, basically, this guy gives me the runaround for 3 years, excuse upon excuse as to why he cannot be with me. Some beautiful stories. So unbelievable. I actually wrote a book about all of this. I've had a very unusual life. Even beyond this, I've survived the 2004 tsunami in Asia that killed 500,000 people. I've been in Afghanistan. I missed a terrorist attack at the Serena by 1 day. The first terrorist attack in the history of the Serena Hotel in the middle of Kabul, and I missed it by 1 day. I have had a lot of interesting experiences.
Well, there is an expression here: if your name's on the bullet.
Yes. Yeah. And so basically, I wrote this book, and it became it was quite adventurous. So it became a #1 Amazon new release. It's called Untamed and Free, in case anybody's interested and curious.
Say that again? Untamed
and Free.
Untamed and Free. I'll put a link to it.
Oh, thank you. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that in all of this, I've always been an independent person. I've traveled to over 60 countries. I've lived across the world. I've had a really good life. I can't complain. And so I'm looking at myself while this is going on and saying, interesting. I was married to this person who is this way, and this happened. Then I find this other person who is this way, and this happens. I'm like, what is the common denominator here? Then I realized it was me. I said, clearly, I knew that there are good men out there. It's impossible that every man is like that. So I'm thinking there is something in me that is not right. That's when I started opening my eyes to the fact that there is a typology of people who do take advantage of others because others are seen as mere pawns in their way to getting what they want. And there's a lot of gaslighting going on. In case your audience is not familiar with this term, it simply means that they basically convince you that your emotions, your feelings, and your thoughts and your observations are incorrect. What matters is what they tell you about our situation, which I'm sure is you're already connecting the dots with what's happening in the world. And this is exactly what happened to me. I started looking into the situation and I started realizing two things. One is that narcissists don't only affect your personal relationships. Clearly, there's something going on in the culture where we're being gaslighted all the time. We are being told, watch my lips, listen to what I'm saying, and discard everything you're seeing with your eyes. So we're being taught to look at, to listen to words as opposed to trusting our observations of reality, our perceptions. And that's one. The second thing I've realized, because I asked myself, how come I fell for the second man? What was it inside of me? And I realized that I needed to survive. I needed something. I was desperate. I was empty inside. I was lost. I lost my identity. I lost my stability. And I was looking for something. And this is when it becomes a matter of survival. I needed someone else to fill that gap because I had not done the internal work to go inside of myself and find my own center. And this is exactly what happens in the world in general with humanity. If we don't go, and we've been taught not to go inside ourselves, if we don't do that, we're always going to be looking for someone outside of us to tell us what to do. And we justify this very logically. And a person, especially say a wealthy person who has access to whatever kind of help they want, they will find a nanny to take care of the child. They will find they will find a good school to take care of the child. They will find a good investment advisor to take care of their money. They will find, do you see what I'm getting to is that we outsource our entire life because we think we're left with, oh, but I'm taking care of making money or whatever that might be. You're telling yourself, but what are we outsourcing? We're outsourcing the priorities in our lives, everything that makes us strong, which is our our finances, our health, our the education of our children, everything that basically makes us powerful. We're outsourcing to other people. Now, here's the funny part. Why do we do this? Really, when you dive deep down, we do this because we don't trust ourselves. So we think we need professionals to take care of these things. And we don't trust ourselves because we've been told in the culture for an entire lifetime that we are unworthy. We're untrustworthy, and that we are worthless, basically. And we see these concepts being promoted in the culture since we're little. We are born, we haven't even done anything, we're already sinners. I mean, it's a big deal. So there is that. Then, of course, as you go to school, you're told you're always wrong. Basically, pretty much, that you should listen to authority. You should discount what you think, what you feel. It doesn't matter. Just be quiet, be sitting, and you will get drugged up if you don't do all of this. I mean, one way or the other, they will get you. Your parents are telling you, for example, they're having a discussion, an argument, and you ask, oh, what's wrong? They say nothing. This is also gaslighting. So we're taught, and what I mean to say, parents don't do this on purpose. They believe they're protecting us. So this is not, I am not throwing guilt and blaming everybody. I am making an observation that it starts very early, and we get to a point where we don't trust ourselves anymore. So we feel better served to trust authority figures that we've been told to not question our entire life, authority figures to tell us what to do in every aspect of our life. Now, some of us are still at that point where they need that. And there are others, the people that are being called awake nowadays, that have realized, have accepted the fact that something is very off, and it's time for us to actually reintegrate all these pieces we've delegated out, because these people are no better than us. Even if you don't go into, conspiracy theory territory, or you think that they're on purpose doing what they're doing, which I believe is the case. Again, having observed several different countries' governments, but let's just assume these are normal people, okay, and they really mean well. If you think that you cannot be trusted, how come you can trust them? They are no better than you. They're just people. They have their own lack of self-worth. They have their own limitations. So here we are. It's the blind leading the blind at best. So how are we allowing this? How are we allowing people to make these important decisions for our own families, even for our health? Is because, again, we've been told that if it comes from the outside and it comes from somebody with certifications, degrees, some kind of authority, we are not to question it. So there's a lot of programming. Consider not only it's been going on historically for eons, but consider in a very practical manner, there are billions of dollars spent on our programming every year. Just watch television, watch any commercial.
Well,
yeah.
You probably haven't seen, there was a Tesco commercial released in the UK yesterday. Tesco is like the biggest supermarket chain.
Mm-hmm.
And Santa's got a vaccine passport in the commercial. It's like,
good luck with that. You do you. We'll shop somewhere else. Yes, and that's the other thing. Eventually, we really want to be growing our own food. Even the fact that we have become so dependent on the system that even if there were a snowstorm and you couldn't get to the supermarket for 3 days, there are people who don't even have enough food in their fridge to last 3 days. That makes no sense to me. We completely lost our minds. We are not able to survive on our own anymore. It's quite scary in many ways. So the point of all of this is that once I realized these strong messages in the culture, and I'll just bring up a couple. For example, for women, a very strong one is you're only as good as your looks. Basically, if you look good, you're worthy. And again, the cosmetics commercials remind you of this, but every other commercial in the world uses a beautiful woman, to sell stuff. Okay, we know this. But also, for example, as a woman, you're supposed to martyr yourself. You're supposed to serve others. If you don't serve others, if you don't put everybody else ahead of you, you're worthless, you're a bad person, you're selfish. Okay. And this was very much ingrained in me. Okay. That's why I decided I stayed so long in a marriage. Now for men, it's just as subtle, just as sneaky. You're only as good as your paycheck. How do they tell you that? They tell you you're a provider. It sounds fantastic, and you guys are very protective. Men have this in them, but it's been twisted. Now you're only as good as your paycheck, meaning that if you make tens of thousands of dollars a year, you're because there's a pecking order, right? If you make millions, oh, you're such a better person. Now we know for a fact, and I'm not trying to throw every rich person under the bus here, but in general, you kind of have to let go of a lot of your integrity, compromise your integrity a lot if you're going to be making millions. And this, I'm generalizing, this is not the case, but this is what we've seen. A lot of the people we see on television who are very successful from a financial standpoint, they've had to compromise a lot to get there. We're talking celebrities, and we can go more in depth, but we know what's going on. But that's exactly what we're talking about. They've made a deal with the devil, like literally, for greed, because greed has been, we've been taught that money is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that makes you worthy of respect. This has also been a message in the culture. And you know very well that money is a very complex topic, because there's nothing wrong with money. Money is an energy that we use on this planet. It's just that it was hijacked a long time ago.
Yeah, well, money is a medium of exchange, and I think I'd agree with that if you're talking about billionaires, not necessarily millionaires.
Yeah.
Because we've been presented with a lot of fake billionaires like Zuckerberg and Bezos, etc., who were all placed there by DARPA, and create this. There's no difference between those guys and winning the lottery. It's just like this dream, this carrot hung in front of everybody. Oh, you too could be 27-year-old billionaire if you were clever enough to invent Facebook. So it's all part of this. It's all part of the mind control, I think. Yeah.
And I think there's more to it. It's also the idea of telling us that we are worthless. There are only a few people who are really brilliant and genius. But as well as I do, if we had been left unprogrammed, we come in as brilliant, genius, creator.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
And so the truth is, these are not special, even if they had done what they have done. And again, we're making a lot of assumptions here because it is exactly what you said. They have not. But there are people out there who are brilliant and who are doing great things in the world. Even if that had been the case, there are a few people that are like that. They're not supposed to be outliers. We all have something inside of us that we are ingenious at. It's just we've not been allowed to pursue it. For example, your third grade teacher told you you're a bad artist. You don't know how to draw. All of a sudden, you give up drawing, even though you loved it.
That's exactly what my teacher said to me. So I haven't drawn for 40 years because of it. Even though I've actually done a few drawings, and I think, oh, that's quite good. But inside, I'm like, no, you're no good at drawing. Don't show anybody.
We carry these messages inside of us, and this is the problem. this is exactly the problem I want to discuss. It's not just about the narcissists. We can point fingers and say, he's a bad person, he's doing this, he's doing that, and that's fine. The problem is that we still carry the symptoms of abuse inside of us. And until we shake those off and we find again our self-worth, our sense of self-worth, and we truly learn to accept ourselves for who we are and love ourselves, we are not healed. So it's taken me many years after these two experiences to heal myself because, as I said, I realized it was me. I was still carrying limiting beliefs that had become blind spots, and on autopilot, they were guiding my life in the wrong direction.
Yeah, so it's like we've all been trained to be codependent.
Yes.
And this concept of codependency, I think I first came across 10 years ago. I didn't understand it because I was completely codependent. I was in a codependent relationship with, at the time, and it's been really hard to get through that for me personally. And I've known a lot of other people who've had similar things. I mean, one of the interesting things about the last 2 years is there's been a huge amount of relationship and marriage breakups, which is all part of this healing process, because unless we heal on an individual level, we can't move into the new earth. We can't go anywhere. We have the ascension process is all about your personal healing journey. But it's not to say that it's your fault, because you're not a victim, because what about the spiritual aspects of this? Because one thing I've realized over the years is that everybody's been demonically possessed or infected with AI, black goo, whatever you want to call it. Everybody. So, and I think this is one of the things that's holding men down at the moment, is that their shame and guilt over their past and their behaviors. Because I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that they've not acted necessarily out of their right. I think a lot of people say and do things and then regret it and think, that wasn't me. Why did I do that? And in a lot of cases, I think it wasn't them. It's literally this world that we've all been born into that allows that kind of creates that behavior by finding the weak point inside somebody in order to make them do something, in order to perpetuate. It's kind of like it's the police system of this farm that we've all been brought up in. And now we're breaking through that, which is why I think what you're doing is so important, because it's kind of like a time of forgiveness for ourselves first. And that, I think, is a very difficult thing for men in particular to do. I know that I found it extremely difficult, even though I've been getting that message for years now. Mm-hmm. And I still think, oh God, how do I forgive myself for saying that, doing that, etc. But we have to get to that point. And also, if you feel like that you're a victim of somebody's behavior, forgiving yourself for allowing that to happen is also, it's not as easy as it's easy to say, isn't it?
It's very easy to say. Now, interestingly, it's the third step of my 3-step process, because in a way it's the most difficult. First of all, you cannot give forgiveness to anyone if you don't forgive yourself, for the simple reason you cannot give what you don't have. So absolutely, you're saying, and you were saying, you're not a victim. We are not victims, of course, but that's also being used. The fact that we don't like to be victims is being used against us, because the truth is, we may not be victims or feel like victims, but we've been victimized. And this is a fact. Mm. And the point is, until we look at ourselves, even the fact, see, this is what I would say to you specifically, because you're saying, how do I forgive myself for this? Just the fact that you are asking the question means you're a good person. A person who is no good is not even going to worry about that. Now, it might be hard for you to accept that you've done certain things, and there are reasons you've done them, and at the time, that's what you knew. The whole point is not to be perfect. Perfectionism, I call it the silent killer, is the most destructive concept that we've been programmed with. Why? Because no one even has a definition for it. So it's unattainable. It's an unattainable utopic ideal, which means you will always fail from the beginning, from the get-go. You already failed. You're a failure. So now you have this sense of existential failure, which of course causes you to feel guilt and shame because you can never measure up. You're already losing. You haven't even started a race. You're already losing. You're already behind. And that's being used against us. So let's look at the facts. The facts are very, very simple. Neither you nor I have killed anybody. So you know what? Everything else we've done is all right. It's the past. That's what we knew at the time. Let's move on. The point is to accept ourselves light and dark. There is no perfection. No one is perfect.
Well, I wrote a poem when I was 19, a 7-word poem, and it was called "There Is Nothing." Well, it wasn't called. This is the poem. There is nothing so perfect as imperfection.
Yes.
So I knew this a long time ago, and a lot of my the plays that I wrote were full of stuff about accepting people, because when we fall in love with anybody, and I don't just mean like marriage, sexual relationships, I mean friendships and everything. If we recognize that there's an element of them that could bite us on the bum in the future, then we should accept that at the beginning of the relationship and not try to change it and not try to ignore it, because if it does eventually bite you on the bum, then you have to accept it. And I learned this the hard way, because my best friend attacked me in a takeaway one night and bashed me over the head, and I was lying on the floor, and he kicked me in the face until I was unconscious, and I woke up in a pile of my own blood, and I was in hospital, and I was out here for like weeks, and all my friends were saying, "You got to report him to the police." And I was like, no, I knew this could happen. He'd had a very rough childhood, and he was taking it. I was the battering ram because I was the person who was closest to him. And he came round my house eventually after about 3 or 4 weeks, and I just forgave him. And I put that into a play, and felt very strongly that was the right thing to do at the time. And I think that's, how do we do? But when people go through the awakening process and they realize what's actually been done to us as a race, it's been said many times that there are certain people awake already who've been awake for quite a while, and some people have just woken up in the last few months. But when the masses wake up, this everybody's talking about the same thing. They're going to go through all this trauma, and they're going to need healers. It's all about healing, right? How do you think that's going to be possible?
I have a little bit of an unusual take on this, because I hear what's being told, on the street about this process. Everybody's going to wake up. I disagree with this. I don't expect everybody will wake up. For a lot of people, it's terrifying, the idea of accepting the fact that we've been living a lie. And that's why it's a matter of survival. A lot of people might ask, how come you stay in a relationship with a narcissist for 20 years, for example? Survival. You're not stupid. I asked myself, I said, why am I so stupid? How could I be so stupid? But it's not stupidity, is it? You could be a perfectly brilliant person out there in the world, but you do things that are foolish. Why? Because it's survival. You think that if you just give in a little more, if you just bend this way a little more, if you just compromise a little more, things are going to be okay and you can take it. So this actually happens to a lot of strong people specifically. It's not even that you're weak, it's that you're strong. You think you can take it. I'm a strong person. I thought, I can take it. It's okay. It's all right. And it's not okay. So the reason I say this, a lot of people, especially strong people, were being served by the system. People were doing quite well in it. Or people that feel so poorly about the human race and themselves that they need somebody to tell them what to do. They're not going to wake up. A lot of these people are just going to leave. Okay. And there is free will on this planet. They should be allowed to leave. It doesn't mean it's going to be fun. We're going to lose a lot of friends. I know. I cried plenty of nights thinking of people, some of my friends who have made some really foolish choices, but I understand. And it is their free choice. For the rest of us which I'm guessing at this point is about 50%. So I'm actually more optimistic than most in this sense. I think we're already probably around 50%. We are going to move forward. We're going to have to rebuild. So a lot of people are still talking. It's okay to get information about what's going on, but the truth is we must focus on rebuilding. And part of rebuilding is reclaiming our sovereignty or becoming sovereign for the first time in our lives. And that includes things like homeschooling, orgasmic birthing, as you say, taking back our health, our finances. But before any of these things, which are necessary, which are sufficient to make you sovereign from an external point of view, you must do the healing, the self-healing, which is the necessary step.
The first thing I wrote down when you started talking was emotional sovereignty.
Yes, absolutely.
And that I'm a big sovereignty is the key to all of this, but emotional sovereignty possibly the hardest one.
Absolutely, because until you heal yourself, we carry the chains of the abuse with us. And anybody who's been in repeat narcissistic or unhappy relationships knows this. If you don't heal yourself, you will repeat the same patterns, because our external reality is only a mirror, a reflection of what we have inside of us. If we feel unworthy of love, we're not going to find love in people. After healing myself, I found a boyfriend. I have a boyfriend now. I did not know that men could be this nice. I didn't. Today's my birthday. And not only took my wife to school, thank you. Not only, it's a great way to start a year having this interview with you. And I found roses on my table, and I found treats for my cats, just little things. And it's what you were saying. We accept each other. We look at ourselves. We know we make mistakes. We don't blame people outside of us. It's about, again, growing up and becoming sovereign. And just so you know, I might have a cat crash this, because my cats love.
Cats are welcome on this show.
I'm glad. You know me, I put cats everywhere. You're lucky I don't have a cat filter on my face. This has been done on Zoom. I don't know if you've heard about this. There are people who don't know how to use Zoom and have all kinds of filters going. It's quite funny. But that's, here's the thing. We are supposed to have fun. This is not supposed to be dreadful. It's supposed to be fun. But what I was going to say is about the external reality. I'll give a very precise example of what we're going through right now, that's showing you how our internal reality reflects to the outside. Everyone is concerned and very upset. Everyone is awake about the censorship. You know this. Being on YouTube, you know this. Well, where does the censorship come from? What do we do to ourselves as victims? And I say victims, but we've been victimized, so I use this word as an equivalent. We censor ourselves. We don't speak up. We don't stand up. We give away our power. There is a reason we're seeing censorship coming up so strong, because this is what we've been doing as humanity, as a collective. I always say the narcissist gaslights us, but then we go on to gaslight ourselves. And we tell ourselves, oh no, I'm sure I'm wrong about this. Oh, I'm going to discard my own thoughts and emotions about this. Why is that? Because we become our own prison guards.
Well, I came up with a phrase a few years ago, self-slaughtering sheep. Now, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense about people that are following what the government says. I mean that people just follow other people. And I was at a party recently when somebody was questioning what I was doing. And they were saying, well, people are going to ask why you're doing it. And I said, what do you mean? I literally didn't understand what he meant. I went, what do you mean? Why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? It's because billions of kids have been murdered, and I don't want to live in that world. And he just didn't. And then I realized he doesn't understand that. Mm-hmm. He's coming from a point of view of like, who do you think you are, going on YouTube? And this is the thing with the narcissism. I've been a public speaker for a long time. I've been an actor, a stand-up comic. Must be a narcissist. That's the, and always having that leveled at me. And it's like, you're not allowed to be successful. You're not allowed to have an opinion. You're not allowed to do shows like this because, why are you doing it? People are going to ask why. And then these little seeds of doubt come in. And then I go through moments of doubt and I go, why am I doing this? And I have to keep recalibrating and going, well, I know that I'm doing it because I want to help. And when I started this channel, for example, the only thing that kept me doing it was the feedback I was getting from people, the emails I got from people, because I'd often sit there with my head between my legs going, how is this going to help? How is this going to make a difference? And then I get these amazing emails from people. I get them all the time. And then I'm like, well, forget what that guy said. This is why. And I'm not perfect. I've never said I am. And that's why I wrote that poem. There's nothing so perfect as imperfection, because we're all imperfect.
Yeah.
And imperfection is perfection. That's what we're creating in God's image, which is obviously imperfection. But so otherwise we wouldn't be living this crazy world.
Well, I have my own opinion about that. I have some guidance that I've received recently. I think I told you I had a QHHT session. I'm actually going to put out that information because they wanted me to have it so that it could be spread. Just haven't gotten around to it. But the point is that everybody, it's a tall poppy syndrome. Everybody wants you to fit in. Peer pressure doesn't end with high school. It's a very real deal. How many times have we not said things? I know I've done this myself, so I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm looking at myself where I could have said something and I didn't. When we do this, a piece of us dies. Our integrity is compromised in that moment. So the whole point here is we have to reclaim our integrity. And integrity simply means reintegrate all the pieces of ourselves that we've abandoned and rejected because somebody else was telling us they were not good enough. That's what I mean by reintegrating ourselves. And this is important because if we don't do this work where we decide, listen, I make mistakes, I'm human. What I can say for myself is I have good intentions. This is the best we can do until we get to that point. Like you're saying, why am I doing this? And you recalibrate and you recenter and you're like, you know what? I have a good purpose. I may make a mistake here and there. Everybody does. This is how we learn. A mistake is simply you're trying something, it didn't go the way you wanted it. If the intention was good, it just didn't go that way. So we redirect. It's really very simple. What we've been taught since school that if you make a mistake, you're an idiot. You get the dunce cap. You're like, but how are you going to learn? I will never forget, and I don't know the exact quote, so I might be paraphrasing here, when I think it was Edison who invented, or was said, that we were told he invented the light bulb or whatever, even I don't even remember. And they said, but you failed 10,000 times. He goes, no, I just found 10,000 ways in which the light bulb doesn't work.
Yeah, I put up a meme the other day saying, you don't fail. If you think you're a failure, you've got to fail better. And that was Samuel Beckett.
Yeah.
I've never been afraid of failure, and I have no fear. I've faced most of my demons, and that's what we've all got to do. And when you were talking through that, what popped into my head was the fact that at the beginning of this, I wanted to stand outside my kid's school with a placard, explaining to people what was going on, but I didn't do it. And the reason I didn't do it is because my daughters basically told me not to, and I thought, I reasoned at the time, well, I'm all over YouTube saying this stuff anyway, so I'm doing something, and I don't want to make life difficult for my kids. And sometimes we do get compromised by situations like that, where you've got to pick your battles as well, haven't you?
Right. I'm not suggesting anybody should do anything that puts them in danger, especially when it comes to relationships with a narcissist. They can be physically dangerous, physically unsafe. I'm not asking anybody to jump off the bridge or do anything crazy. What I am saying, use your discernment and become stronger inside yourself. And maybe you start with a different area of your life. You strengthen yourself. You learn to love yourself and to forgive yourself. And then as you become stronger, you expand this concept to other areas of your life. We all have to be gentle with ourselves. We've been brainwashed for eons, again, for entire lives at minimum. You can't expect we're going to change overnight. The work I've done, it's taken me 5 years. And it doesn't mean that I'm perfect now. It just means that I'm aware, I realize when I'm not being true to myself. That's the difference. And so now when I do make decisions, I ask myself, am I wanting to do this because I think is the best way, or am I doing this because I'm getting pressure or would be easier, et cetera, et cetera? The point is to ask questions. What we don't do, a lot of people who we call the sheeple, which is not a very kind name, it's very judgmental. And I do actually want to talk about this a little bit later, but a lot of these people that we judge so harshly, the problem is that they don't want to ask the questions because they already know the answers. And they cannot afford to ask the question because the whole world will self-destroy in front of them.
But it's like you said, it's survival. I remember in 2010, my neighbor in England, really nice guy. We were talking about 9/11, and I said, look, it's so obvious that it wasn't what they said it was. And as I started talking, he literally put his fingers in his ears, started going la da 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 da, and I was like, you're a grown man. What are you doing? And then he saw I stopped talking. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I can't hear that." I said, "Why not? Why aren't you interested in the truth?" He said, "Because it would destroy my entire worldview." And I was so shocked that I still talk about it, 12 years later, because I'm still shocked. I still can't understand how anybody could literally.
It's painful. It truly is painful. And again, we've been taught that we cannot take care of ourselves, that we cannot handle. So I want to talk very briefly then, because you brought this up, about the five about the 5 stages of grief. This is important. It's because they are denial, and then there is anger and bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So for us, apologies for the tail.
By the way, I've been through all of these many times.
Yes, and that's the thing. It doesn't mean that you experience them in order and neatly. You can go back and forth. You experience 1 or 2 at the same time even. I've been angry and depressed at the same time. But the point is, a lot of the people that we consider, again, unawake or sleeping or whatever it is, they're in denial, and they're also depressed, for example. And they cannot, they think the reason we go into denial, and we all go through that when there's a shock, there's a major shock to the system, it's because our brain cannot survive if it's overwhelmed. And so it shuts down. And in order to preserve ourselves, because our brain is there, our body's there, and it needs to preserve ourselves, we must go into denial because it's so overwhelming that we can't physically survive. So these people are not, again, they're not stupid. They're doing what makes sense to do. And here's what I want to say. When we look at these people, so this is what I wanted to bring up earlier. I have come up with 3 stages or 3 types of people that we're seeing today in the world. In the last 2 years, these have become very obvious. The first group of people is very, very codependent on the government, which means that they don't want to see. Again, they're in denial, and they don't want to know what's going on. Some of them even love the control because it makes them feel like somebody is controlling the chaos that's out there that they feel inside of themselves. And they like to be told what to do. Indeed, they become unofficial law enforcers. So they're the ones who are going to call the police if you're not wearing a mask. They're going to turn you in if the music is too loud, whatever it is, because they feel like their only worth comes from connection with authority, even though they have no authority of their own. The second group of people is the people that we consider in 4D, the people who are aware, they've accepted that the system is abusive, that the system is corrupt, and that it's not for our own good. And they feel like if only someone nicer, they have a bit of a savior concept. If only someone nicer was in charge, telling them what to do, fixing the system, everything would be great. They could go back to focusing on the things they like to do, watching sports, worrying about making a paycheck, whatever it is. You can focus on your family because everything else is being taken care of.
Well, you just described the 2-party political system perfectly.
That's correct. Yeah. And then we have the 5D, what I call the 5D people, the third group of people. These are the people who realize we have supported the system. We are the system. These people are like us. The people who become politicians, I can go out tomorrow and become a politician. It doesn't make me a different person. It makes me someone who believes in the system, okay? So this is all us. We're all helping, I call it aiding and abetting the system. We have all done this. Until we take our power back and heal ourselves, we've all had instances when we haven't spoken up, like you were saying, for whatever reason. There is no judgment here. We've all done this, okay? But now this last group of people is at the point where they're like, all right, let's rebuild this, which doesn't mean we replace the people. When I had the second narcissist in my life, I was simply replacing my husband, my ex-husband. I didn't do any better because I hadn't healed myself. I still carry the same limiting beliefs that still made me make very poor choices. Until we heal ourselves, we cannot make better choices, which means we're not going to be able to handle a lot of things. The reason I bring this up, even though these are 3 types of people, we've all been at every stage. We've all been in the system where we believe the system was all there was. So we should be compassionate with the people in that group because we were there not that long ago.
Well, I just want to say to everybody watching, I did write a poem about 10 months ago that started with the line, "Okay, dear sheeple, you've had your fun, now shit's about to get real." And I do think it was more was more comedy for me at the time, but I am regretting calling people things like that these days, because I do have more compassion. I still drive along going, what the fuck, get that mask off. I still do that.
We all get angry. You're human. Congratulations, we discovered this. Okay. That's the point that we were making. Both you and I are talking about go back and forth in these stages. We are not perfect. We can only, I've had moments of anger. I'm not going to stand here behaving like I'm enlightened and I'm a saint. I'm not. We do the best we can. That's the whole point of accepting yourself as you are. We have good days and we have bad days. There are bad days that you're like, oh, I hate everything. And then there are days that you're like, well, that wasn't so great. Maybe I wasn't at the highest frequency I could be at. That's all we can do.
Yeah. And so you've written a guide to help people through this, right?
Yes. And so this guide is based on my discovery process by trial and error for 5 years of what works and what doesn't work in this process, in how to heal ourselves. Basically, I had to go down to really deep down to figure out where this was coming from. Because it's not easy to get rid of blind spots. They're blind for a reason. And that's what we need to get rid of. We basically have to do deprogramming. That's been done for decades on us, on me at least. I'm several decades old, I won't say how old. As I said, it's my birthday today. So I can look back and say, wow, there has been a lot of cultural programming that I have been absorbing. So I've written this book based on this perspective, which is we all go through certain programming. How do you deprogram yourself? It's a matter of centering yourself. So there are 3 steps. The first step is becoming self-aware. This goes beyond an awareness and acceptance of the external reality. This goes into who you are, and it takes the success key here is radical honesty. Now, we were just talking about this. A lot of people don't like the truth. They don't want the truth. I myself was able to do this work because I will take the truth above anything else. It could be hard, but I want the truth because at least I can fix stuff. Without data, without the truth, there's nothing I can do. So for people who are ready to handle that, and it might make you angry, it might make you depressed, and that's fine. But if that's what you want, that's your intention, you will find it. I have a set of exercises and basically the ways that I have found it. And I know it works with other people because I've had a lot of great feedback on it. I'm very happy about this. The second point is becoming sovereign. And the success key here is radical self-responsibility. If we are not ready to take charge of our lives, nothing will change. If you think somebody else will care more or know more about your life and what's good for you than yourself, there's nothing I can do to help. And because at the end of the day, no one will care about your life and your well-being as much as you do, period. Maybe your parents, maybe. Okay. So the point is realize this and realize that if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else is going to do. And I was going to mention that, again, there are several physical ways in which you become sovereign. And you and I will speak more about this because I do plan on creating actually a masterclass around that and the ways in which we take charge of our own external reality. But again, it's fundamental to do the internal work first. The third and final step has to do with becoming enlightened, is what I call it. And the key to this is radical compassion. Now, it comes to forgiving, but here's the kicker. And I think we already hit on it a few times, but I want to spell it out. Forgiveness, people think forgiving others, especially those who have trespassed against us, is hard. The hardest person to forgive is yourself. Mm-hmm. This is what we're all being challenged with. The fact that, now, I do want to make this this distinction. Forgiving others does not mean that you let them trespass against you again. Sometimes you need distancing. But what it means is that once you've healed yourself and you look at the situation from, 20,000 foot view, you can look back and say, this was for my betterment. I've come out a better person. This was for me, not done to me, but was done for me. And I am the actor, the main actor in my story. I created all of this. That's a distance that allows you to become emotionally centered, where you realize you have been in charge of your life your entire life. They make you believe that somebody else is in charge of it, but it is your choice to do what other people are telling you to do. So the whole time, you're the one who's allowed certain things to happen in your reality. And this is the problem. A lot of people don't want to hear this. They don't want to say this happened because I made it happen or I let it happen. And we're not talking about, diseases or anything like this. I am talking about the fact that a lot of the situation we're in, we've allowed to happen. And until we realize and take responsibility for it, we're never going to move forward.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of people lose faith at the moment, which is interesting, and a lot of things crumbling, which I'm finding really fascinating about this period that we're in right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put links to all Clea's stuff in the description. And if any of you engage with Clea, you should come on in a month or so and discuss it deeper. It'd be good to have a roundtable on this because it's actually a fundamental subject, I think, right now. How people struggling to find the way through. And it's although I always talk about the practical things like money, food, health. This emotional side of it is probably my weakest area.
It is the hardest. I mean, it's easy to learn, easy quote unquote, to learn how to grow your own food. It's just you get a manual, and again, somebody else is telling you how to do it. So we're used to learning that way. The problem is we get to meet with this process. We get to meet who we are for the first time in our lives. For many of us, we get to look inside and be like, and that there's a darkness in there. There's a darkness for the simple reason you never shed light inside there. And all of a sudden you find out there are a lot of things that you thought you were deciding because you thought about them logically. No, you just did because you didn't know any better or because you were afraid of something. And that's what comes up most of the time. There's this fear. There's this existential fear that a lot of us carry.
Yeah. Well, I started shadow working a long time ago, and it's just amazing how many shadows there are.
They're mostly darkness because that's how the cosmos is created, right? It's mostly dark. We've just been told that the dark is bad. There's nothing bad about the dark. The dark is just a contrast to the light. There's nothing wrong about sadness. We've been told that certain emotions are unacceptable and not socially welcome. So we're taught, for example, to paint smiles on our faces like clowns and walk around pretending that we're happy when we are miserable inside. In fact, even better, if you medicate yourself so you can be a little happier because we're tired of having you around with a long face. Is this really what we want to do to our brothers and sisters who are, it's us, we're all one? Is this how we want to be treated? We think that when we do this to other people, it doesn't come back to us. Well, guess what? At some point, we're not going to be happy, and this is what's going to be expected. When I was depressed, I was really, really sad in a bad spot for several years. I was afraid of telling anybody. I felt radioactive. I didn't even want to be around anybody. And I'm a very social person, so that was adding to my depression, the fact that I isolated myself. But it's because we've been taught, I didn't even tell anybody that I was going to divorce. It took me 9 months to tell even my parents because I felt like a failure. And here's the thing, I don't even believe in failure. Where did that come from? I believe the failure is only if you stop. It's almost like you're in the middle of a soccer game. I'm Italian, so I speak about soccer. You're in the middle of a soccer game, you're down 2-1 for the other team. Is that a failure? No, you still have one half to go. How do you know it's a failure? It's only a failure if you stop. If you stop the game at that point, you lost. But if you keep going until you win, guess what? It was a success. The failure is all relative. This is the problem. A lot of the things we think, these are not our thoughts. These were thoughts that were put into our minds. We never stop to question and investigate, why do I think this? What do I actually think about this? Do I even have an opinion about this? Have I had an experience in my life that tells me this? We just assume other people have done their homework. So if they're telling us this, it must be true. But do you know anybody who's done their homework? I know very few people who've actually thought about stuff. And so we keep going. Again, the blind leading the blind. We keep going, assuming things. You know what happens when you assume, right? We have a saying in the US, I don't know if you have it there. We say when you assume, you're making an ass out of you and out of me. And that's exactly how we're living. We take all these beliefs at face value, we embody them, we incorporate them, and they're based on fluff. I always tell people, if you're afraid, and most people are afraid, if you're afraid, break it down. What are you afraid of? Define it, name it, call it out. Because you will find out that we're afraid of nothing most of the time. There's nothing to be afraid of.
There isn't. On my course, I talk about assumption being the mother of all f-ups. And what's interesting, I learned that from a wise, I say wise, he was wise in some ways, but an experienced business mergers and acquisitions guy. And it's amazing how many things that we have assumed that we don't even realize we've assumed. And this is why I talk to people about, and I've been doing this for a long time, you know, asking people why they do the things that they do. Because when you break it down, it's amazing. I mean, I used to get 100 people in a hotel on a Sunday who worked for me and get them all to stand up in front of the rest of the company and explain why they did their job. And it was what a process. And anybody watching this should try that process themselves at home or in front of other people, just to really dig into why you do what you do, because most of us are lying to ourselves. And a lot of that is based on assumption. And it is shadow work in and of itself doing that, because you have to go in. And it's also very revealing and makes life a lot simpler when you actually get to the bottom of why you get up in the morning, why you go to work, why you're in a relationship, why you do, you know, it's a wonderful place to start. But
yes.
I looked up there and our time was 5555, which I think is a good time to start. It was great. It's great to speak to you, Clea. Very interesting stuff. I'll leave links to everything in the description. Thank you very much for sharing.
I do want to say a very quick thing, if you don't mind, about, because I do believe in this message. I do think this is very important, and it's changed my life. I'm actually really, really happy now, even though my life is a lot simpler than it used to be. The reason, what I did, because I do believe in spreading this message, is I have written this this guide, and I would have given it away for free if I could have. However, because I do have some promotion costs, I have done the very next best thing, which is I've only priced at $9, because I don't want money to become an excuse for not doing this work. I think this is life-changing. Even more, I think this can be world-changing. I think a lot of us, especially a lot of people in your audience, are ready for this. Again, we're not looking in the rear view mirror anymore. We have all the information we need about the system, and now we're doing the work that you're talking about. And it does make life simpler when you're happy. It really does.
Well, you know, I'll drink to that, but I'm not drinking at the moment. So I'll go and have a cup of tea. Thank you, Clea. Thanks everybody for watching. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.